First of all, I want to thank everybody who stayed to watch this panel and who's here today. This is exciting, our first year to have this forum, so I have several hats on as co-founder and board member of the Economic Club. Thank you all for supporting us. This is the first of many to come. And I'm also sitting here not so much as a board member of the Economic Club, but of a new venture that I'm taking on with the help of the state of Florida, the Secretary of Commerce, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But so before I go into what my new venture is, I want to talk to you about Miami. And Miami, and I tell this every time I speak at any kind of a forum or representing Miami in any way. Miami didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen through the pandemic that you've got these big these big buildings, and it's so much business going on. And Miami started in the 60s with the Cubans and some of the Nicaraguans and some of the Central Americans fleeing political disarray in their countries. So the Cubans and the Nicaraguans came here and they started building, and then in the 70s and 80s, unfortunately, is a time that you don't want to talk about it, but it really was about the cocaine money that was coming in and, was booming Miami. That closed down, and we went back to the Latin Americans coming in the 90s. We had the Venezuelans fleeing, also political disarray in their country, and they're coming here with their pocketbooks full of cash because they want to get their money out of their country. So Latin America has always been a driving force financially here for our country. Obviously, during the pandemic, it halted a little bit, and then we got a lot of noise from the US, the transplants as I call, coming here. But we're back to business, and the reality is Miami and will always be the gateway to Latin America. So with that said, one of the concerns that we had was that we had not catered to some of these Latin American families who in the past have really made our city. And so with the help of these individuals in here in the state of Florida and some politicals, we created the LATAM Family Office Society, which is basically a conglomerate of Latin American family office, key family offices, together under one roof, so that they have power outside of their country. Not only financial power, because everybody want to look at them as, okay, come and invest here, but it's a form of having an opportunity, having a say globally by uniting. And with that, I'm going to present our panel, and I want to tell you just a little bit about what I know of family offices, because I'm not an expert. That's what these individuals that are here with me today, who are all advisory members of the LATAM Family Office Society. But family offices basically can be, a small family who's managing their office, or it could be a huge billionaire family who is investing in different projects. But the reality has become the leading force behind investments. Everybody's seeking family offices to look at what they have to invest. And so with that, I want to present the panel who can elaborate a little bit more about the importance of Latin family offices. I'm going to start, well, let me first introduce each one of you, and I have a little cheat sheet here, I apologize. Even though I know them, I want to make sure I don't miss out on anything. So Russell Deakin is the Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner at Aceana Group, which is a family office based out of Brazil. Although he is not Brazilian, he is married to a wonderful Brazilian lady. And he understands family office. He also understands the U.S. because he has a fund here in the U.S. So he's a little bit of both. He wears both hats. Eduardo Arista, the next gentleman on sitting next to Russell, is the partner at Holland and Knight. He's an attorney and a CPA with over 25 years of experience as a trusted advisor in ultra high net worth, multifamilies, and private companies. So he is the guy to go to for most of the international forces, whether you're a family office or a business coming here to the U.S. And then the last but not least, and really the mentor behind creating the LATAM Family Office Society, is Rosemary Sagar. She's the Chief Investment Officer at the Sagar Family Office, and she has such an impressive resume. I'm not even going to go into details. Maybe she'll elaborate a little bit because she's a little bit shy about bragging about herself. But with that, I'm going to start with you, Rosemary. What's special about a family office? Elaborate to us what, from your experience and your, many hats to wear, but as a family office, what makes it so unique?
Thanks, Lourdes. Okay, so I've spent the last 19 years in the family office world, managing my own family's entities, as well as the Kingdon Foundation out of New York for Mark Kingdon, Kingdon Capital, one of the oldest hedge funds. And that was for about 18 years. And I left a year and a half ago, but still informally advising them. And before that, I spent 20 years on the institutional side, basically 6 years as an analyst covering Europe for Morgan Stanley, Drexel Burnham in the good old days, and then 14 years as a global portfolio manager for global equities, ex-US, and so including emerging markets at GE, managing GE Pension under Jack Welch, and at US Trust. So I feel very fortunate for two things. One is moving from the institutional side to the family office side, and also moving from public markets to private markets at just the right time. And there's a lot of linkage between these two trends, really, because family offices have emerged as the most powerful force collectively within the private markets. And in the capital markets, all the growth has been in the private markets over the last 20 years. And my personal opinion, that whole trend started with, reg fair disclosure back in the year 2000. And out of that, a few years later, developed the conventional wisdom that you can't win in the public markets. You might as well just index. And active investors basically started shrinking, and passive and index started growing. Well, at the same time, with all the startup activity and innovation, that created humongous wealth for a lot of families. And their natural world is on the private side. And then add to that the 10-year experiment by the Fed with negative real interest rates, it became a no-brainer to invest private and not care whether your money's locked up for 10 years because it doesn't cost anything. And now, now it's a new paradigm these last few years. So now it's with the rising cost of capital, you start discounting, you dust off your old Finance 101 books and start discounting the future cash flows, and suddenly they disappear if your duration is too long. So, so really a lot of shifts going on, but I'm going on too long here, so let me give the floor to my colleagues.
Well, I have a question for Ed. And maybe Russell, why don't you answer that question? Because you're also in the family office entity. What's special about family offices from your perspective?
So I think the saying, one family office, one family office. So Rosemary are good friends, along with Eduardo and Lourdes. We've known each other, but especially Rosemary and I have looked at different deals. Very talented, but we have quite a different view of the markets. So I started with really investing as a family office. In 1995, I was a CFO we had two operating businesses. One is real estate development, and the other is we have productive farmland, so we produce rice and cattle. Those are two operating businesses in Brazil. And the fact that in 2001, I actually started and then became a partner in Latin America's oldest venture capital firm. So I have a different profile. So what makes, I think, our family office a bit unique, we have a bifurcated model because we get yields from the real estate portfolio. We get yields, and it's a very recession-proof business. Rice and cattle, rice and meat is in southern Brazil, that's on every meal. So everyone eats that. So it's a wonderful hedge. And also the fact is the price of land has been going up. So the fact that I've been a venture capitalist, we seek alpha. So I do predominantly private markets. Rosemary mentioned that. And we do predominantly early stage venture growth capital. And we also take GP stakes in venture capital private equity firms. So very different model than perhaps a lot of my peers. And that's what I think is so unusual about family offices. And anyone here who wants relationships with family offices, what I would suggest, take the time to get to know each one of them before you pitch them, because we all have very different profiles and very different opinions about the markets.
Thank you, thank you. So Ed, let me go to you. So what are some of the legal and tax issues that Latin American families should consider before investing and relocating to the U.S.? That's a really important one, especially for this audience.
Thank you, Lourdes, y buenas tardes. It's nice to be here at Miami-Dade College. Some of the legal and tax issues that LATAM family offices have to deal with that I see every day in my practice, and it's whether it's a family office or just an ultra high net worth LATAM family that we're seeing coming more and more to Miami, to the United States in general. Number one is worldwide taxation, which is a game changer. Most of my clients have had maybe they've had a house in Key Biscayne, or they've had an account in New York or in Miami, and so they have encountered the U.S. tax system, but what's in the U.S. they've dealt with in the U.S., and whatever they've had to do back at home they deal with back at home, but there hasn't been any kind of exchange, and that all changed about 10 years ago, and they are realized that now once they become a U.S. tax resident, they're taxed on a worldwide basis. So those of us who are U.S. citizens, we're used to that. We know that whether we earn income in the United States or we earn income in France or in Panama or on the moon, it's all going to be on our tax return. But for foreigners coming in, they're not used to that. And not only is it an issue of worldwide taxation that their operating companies back at home, their assets offshore are going to become subject to U.S. tax when they are a family member becomes a U.S. tax resident, not just because they become a citizen, but because they have a green card or they spend too much time here. The informational reporting requirements are very important. Particularly in Latin America, there's a lot of issues with personal security, and unfortunately a lot of corruption. And so there's a fear that when their government has more information than they need to have about their finances, about where their assets are, they and their family are at risk. And so when the information is exchanged between one country and another, there's concerns about what's going to happen with that information. So privacy is a big deal. And we have a new law that just came into place called the Corporate Transparency Act. Every new company that's formed this year, within 90 days, every U.S. company and every foreign company registered to do business in the U.S. that is formed this year has 90 days to report who their ultimate beneficial owners are, who the individuals behind that company who have at least a 25% interest or some form of substantial control. And every other company formed before 2024 has until the end of the year to file that report. And that is something that has been different in the United States compared to a lot of the rest of the developed world who's already gone through this. So there's a lot of information that is coming out, and when a LATAM family office comes over, they can't just think of tax planning, they can't just think of asset protection and estate planning and all these legal issues. Privacy is a major concern because it's not what it used to be here in the United States.
Great answer. So Rosemary, let me ask you, how does a family office ecosystem work in the U.S. and globally? So what is attractive, and I guess it leads into what Ed was just talking about, besides the tax and the legality, what is attracted to them to be outside of, in a global stand?
I probably get about half of my good investment ideas from other family offices in the ecosystem. And so that interchange and comparing notes with peers is incredibly important. And by the same token, when I've done my due diligence and get into an attractive investment, I'm very generous in sharing that with some of my peers. And I don't get paid for that, but that generosity gets repaid in other ideas. So it's the system works very well once you have a network and can build trust in these relationships. So in the U.S., it's very well established. There's a whole, I'd say, tiers of different family office-oriented conferences. There's the very exclusive ones that are by invitation only, and very, very small, and people jet in from all over the world. Then there's the broader ones, and then there's the mixed ones that have both registered investment advisors and family offices. So there's it's really a very broad and complex ecosystem. But it's interesting that once we started drilling into it, that really doesn't exist in the Latin countries. And that's why we believed that we could add a lot of value by creating something like that.
Terrific. Russell, do you want to join in?
Certainly. I can attest that Rosemary is very generous. We've looked at a few deals together, and 2 days ago we had a dinner together with a fund manager. So that's the fun part about with the family office. You meet a lot of intelligent people with vast ideas. Ourselves, for example, even though we're Brazilian-based, we're British-Brazilian-based, so we have investments in Latin America, we have investments in the U.S., we have investments in the U.K., we have investments in India, we have investments in Singapore for the moment, and others to come. So the diversity is very, very important. There are certainly different layers. Just next week, for example, I'm having the privilege, I was invited to go to a family office retreat in Las Vegas, where there's going to be 40 of us, and we're going to talk about a few themes that are everyone's interested. We put together what themes, and it's beginning of the year, so it's really just to sit down for 2 days and to strategize. I find those events very valuable, very enjoyable, and one of the things I do travel a lot looking for managers and direct deals, indirect deals. And one of the first things that I do, for example, last year I was in Singapore in September, and we had done an investment in a Singapore in a blockchain fund. But I wanted to talk to more people, get to know the ecosystem, so I spent a week on the ground in Singapore. And very quickly I was invited to the family office events with other family offices, which was one and very enjoyable. But one of the things I do is, who are your top 3 managers? Let's say if it's lower middle market, venture capital, whatever. And I ask fellow family offices, and it saves me a tremendous amount of time, because if I get 3 or 4 families repeating the same 3 or 4 names, that's certainly going to help me, and they're on my short list. Obviously, I'm in the end, I'm going to make that decision. I make the due diligence decision. But it's a very effective, efficient way and enjoyable way to try and save our time, because we have, 300-400 people in the operating companies, but I have 5 on the investment company, which is small, which I think most family office you'll find that. So I need to be able to create an effective system to find new ideas and new investments. And the family office are a big part of that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Ed, this goes to you. So what are some of the key drivers behind the trend of offshore wealth coming to the U.S.?
So I think that might come back a little bit to what I just said, but they're going back about 10, 15 years ago. Some of us may remember the UBS scandal, where there were a lot of Americans that had Swiss bank accounts that they weren't reporting in the U.S. And after that came a law called FATCA, and that basically forced other banks in other countries all around the world to identify accounts held by Americans and report those accounts back to the IRS here in the United States. And with some countries, that reporting was reciprocal, but with many countries, it's not. And the way that it works, even when the exchange of information is officially reciprocal, it doesn't necessarily work that way in practice. and that led to a trend where the United States was a good place to park financial assets that would be held in a more private fashion. And other information exchange systems like the Common Reporting Standards adopted by Europe and most of the rest of the world was multilateral, where all the countries that signed up for it all agreed to exchange information automatically. Didn't apply to the U.S., still doesn't apply to the U.S. And so there was a lot of movement from offshore to the United States for that purpose. And legal structures such as trusts. In fact, you may have seen, if you got the handout that has sort of a blue cover, is an article that I wrote recently that was published in the STEP Journal. Thank you, Russ. Thank you. The STEP Journal, an article that I wrote on U.S. trust for LATAM families. It's a London-based group of trust and estates practitioners that I'm a member of, and they were kind enough to publish my article. And so U.S. trusts and U.S. structures became the premier vehicle, the vehicle of choice is what the article is called, so that Latin American families can have their wealth, not just in a private way, but in a tax efficient way, in a way that's asset protected, and in a way that when it comes time to transition that to the next generation, it's done more privately according to their wishes, with administration that by people that they trust and not by some judge in some random court. And so we've seen that trend. And again, it's driven by security. It's driven by trying to flee country risk. Many of my clients have told me I don't mind paying taxes. I just want to pay them where I know that I'm going to be safe, where I know I'm not going to get a phone call that when after dropping off my daughter at school that somebody picked her up while I wasn't looking, and now they're holding her and they're giving me wire transfer instructions and 24 hours. So it's something that has driven. That's on the negative side. On the positive side, obviously, this is the land of opportunity, right? There's all kinds of investments that can be made in the United States. The United States is the most vibrant economy, and the family office market itself, and my colleagues can probably give you better numbers than me, but it's in the trillions of dollars that are controlled by family offices. So this is another. If you're looking to sell your business, you're looking to raise capital. If you're an institutional fund and you want more investors, you're more and more looking to family offices to provide that capital, because it's only growing more and more every day.
It's funny because we had one of our advisory board members, a prominent family from Latin America, and I remember he moved here, and he says, I moved here, everybody thought it was crazy. What are you doing? You're going to be paying taxes in the U.S.? And he says he's been here for 10 years, and he looks at his financial statement, and he looks at, his family that stayed back in their country, and, there's no difference. He pays taxes, they have to pay it in some form over there in those countries. When the government changes course, when, the economy goes down, they have to pay it anyway. So he says, I'd rather pay it to, a real government that's gonna take care of me than to pay it over there in certain different ways.
Lourdes, I just want to comment something that Ed mentioned. So the amount of assets now by family office is equal to the amount of assets by institutional investors. Think about that. That's a lot of money.
It's incredible. Is that globally?
Globally. So one of the things where a lot of family office, and now Brazil also we have global taxation, so it's not a big deal for Brazilians, which is, I think, quite unique compared to other Latin American countries. So we're used to paying global taxes. But the opportunities, which you mentioned, it's not about the growth, it's about the net, and how can you grow your assets. Well, if you're in the land of opportunity in the U.S. and other capitalists, not just the U.S., but other capitalist countries as well, you're obviously going to do much better long term. And it's much more stable and able to forecast, and that's much less volatility in the economy year by year.
Well, that leads me into the third question I have for you, and Rosemary and Ed, you're welcome to join in. I know that you probably know this one. Where do you see the most interesting investment opportunities global for some of these families?
Shall we let Rosemary start first?
Sure. So we always look for secular trends underpinning the choice of investments. And we're seeing some very compelling reasons to look at private credit strategies, because banks are constrained in their lending through regulations and also through losing deposits in a big way, given the higher interest rates. And therefore, basically their hands are tied and they're not allowed to lend to smaller borrowers in particular. So that's opened up the opportunity for quite a few direct lending strategies to small and medium-sized businesses and to other niches, I should say. So we've done quite a bit of that, from secured lending to construction companies and single-family home building, to lending to growth companies in a fully secured way with good collateral, and also leasing. Then within private equity and venture, the focus has been very much on cash flow producing businesses, and the best bang for the buck we've been finding through secondary funds that buy out early investors in private companies at big discounts. So they're providers of liquidity. And basically, as an investor in those funds, I'm getting in much closer to exit, and because they're lending to private companies that don't require funding, and that have already been proving themselves and having high growth rates, there ought to be no failures, rather than the rule of thumb of 40% failures in venture funds. So very different dynamics. And so really anything with an accelerated return off capital and an accelerated return on capital as well.
So I'll give 3 examples in 3 different countries. In Brazil, we recently invested, we took a GP stake in a fund, which is a direct investment on the holding company of a fund manager. And the focus on that is doing logistical warehouses, distribution centers. So to give you, why did we do that? Well, we have some experience obviously in Brazil in real estate, but if you look at Brazil, it's the size of the continental United States. It's a little bigger actually if you take out Alaska, which is, I don't consider in the same continent, but all of the logistical warehouses in Brazil is less than what currently is in Chicago. Think about that. A lot of room for growth, right? So we're getting yields 12.5%. And we're probably getting returns shooting for 25% and more. So that's an example in Brazil. Example in India. I first went on a business trip. I went before, but on a business trip, I went to India in 2019. I looked at all the fund managers, venture capital, growth capital funds, and didn't think there was enough distribution. There's not enough called DPI, distributed principal invested. It's taking too long to get your money out. I went back again in 2023, and something had changed. And what had changed? If we look at the macro political events, China, if you look back in 2022, was the darling of everyone emerging market. So institutional fund managers, 65% of them said China was the #1 priority. This was in a conference that I went to in Zurich in October last year. Now, it's dropped down to 5%. Huge change. Where's all that money going to? India, Southeast Asia. So what's that mean? Money's going in, is creating trade sales, M&A activity. Most of the distribution and sales go from M&A, mergers and acquisition. So if all the money's going into India, it creates liquidity. So that's why we decided we invested in the number one oldest fund manager in India, which we actually liked because I used to be a member of the oldest fund manager in venture capitalists in Brazil. So obviously synergy, we think people get better at it over time doing the job. So we've invested in their funds and doing co-investments with them. And then here in the United States, there's a lot of technology that's going on globally, but we believe that I've been investing in technology since 2001 as a venture capitalist, and then since 2006 for my own balance sheet. We see a lot of opportunities going on. Some of them are overhyped, but then you got to find managers that really know what they're doing, not managers that just finished their MBA and sorry, I won't pick on the bank, but going to work for one of the Wall Street banks and setting up a new AI fund. He's going to learn on my money. I'm not going to let that happen. But there are funds out there who've been investing in blockchain for 8 or 9 years. Blockchain, big data. These are blockchain. It's been around 10 years. Big data, one of my most successful funds, he's been doing for 10 years. So you got to find the niches, look at the trends, and then find the manager or the direct investments with someone who's been doing it a long time. And so there's a lot of opportunities. So I do a lot of things in the U.S. related to technology.
Okay, one last question to each one of you. What's your take on the LATAM Family Office Society?
I think it's a extremely important organization, and frankly, when you first told me about it, Lourdes, I was surprised to find out that no one's doing it. No one's, there are other family office organizations, but not a LATAM family office. And what an opportunity, what a need there is for it. So I think it's something very important because a lot of what is a family office is a very amorphous concept. I mean, you ask several people what a family office is, you're going to get many different answers. And over the last quarter century that I've been practicing, I've seen a lot of different trends working in LATAM, having traveled all over LATAM regularly, where certain laws, the United States will come up with a new law or a new system, and then usually Mexico, maybe Colombia will adopt it first, Brazil, and then it'll start trickling down to other countries eventually, or a regulatory framework like anti-money laundering, started in the U.S. and started getting adopted by other countries. The concept of the family office is still relatively new in Latin America, and so they're like many other things. We have a lot, obviously, to learn from Latin America. But Latin American families are still learning about how to form family offices, how they work, how to benefit from them, how to do it right, how to take advantage of the tax benefits that a family office can provide to a family, the security that it can provide, the success rate in terms of surviving generational transfers because a family office is set up properly. And the LATAM Family Office Society is filling that gap, and it's providing that serving that need.
It's badly needed, and I can't wait to facilitate an exchange of ideas with peers in the region.
I think, obviously, I agree with the comments from my colleagues. It's another, I think, example that fortunately with Lourdes, founding the society, and with Rosemary being one of the founding and one of the mentors, it's an opportunity for Miami to cement its place, it will strengthen its place really as a gateway for Latin America, put it in a special way. I heard a very intelligent gentleman that said, it was an interesting, provocative comment, but he thinks that Miami is going to be one of the 5 global financial cities in the next few years. I hope it happens. I've been here 17 years, and it's certainly changed. There's a lot of private equity conferences. There's a lot of this week was crazy with conferences, private equity, venture capital, credit funds, before Art Basel. And the more we do this, create a center of exchange of ideas, of forum, as a city, and then even more importantly, as this society, it's very valuable. It's value added, and it creates more and more opportunities and draws more and more, hopefully, intelligent people with lots of resources, not just money, but intellectual resources as well.
I think we're on the right track.
We are indeed.
Any questions or no time for questions? Okay. Oh, somebody has a question. Can we take a question? No? All right. Okay, this one's going to be a hard one, I
Make
know
it a good
this.
one.
Thank you, and thank you, the panel, for your thoughts. I think they were very insightful. However, in Latin America, long term is 90 days, okay? It's a matter of survival, and the family office should be the mirror of the operating company. So how do you manage the complexities when you add, the family dynamics where you have to make decisions long term, when you have this mentality that you have to manage, your companies in a very short time frame just to survive? And the bonus question is, have you seen LATAM Family Office embracing the ESG standards in their investments, or we still have a long way to go?
I'd like to maybe start with answering that. My first month in Brazil, inflation was 90% for the month. For the month, March 1990. Brazil and a lot of countries have come a long way. So yes, there's more volatility. Yes, there's higher inflation in general. But any organization, any company, any family, I believe, plans for the long term, generates enough operating cash, and you had to invest. I mean, we grow rice and cattle. We have to invest in the infrastructure. We had to build warehouses. We had to build roads. We had to do a lot of different things that if you don't put the resources and plan for that with a 20-year plan, you can't be successful. So I respectfully disagree. I think Latin American families do plan for the long term. Maybe they had to put away a little bit more for the short-term reserves. Maybe don't use as much leverage. For example, when we build buildings in construction, we manage to self-finance it. We don't count on expensive capital. So there's certain adjustments. But the longer-term approach, I think, is very necessary. I know Rosemary, and I'm going to give a plug, their family has the oldest law firm in India, 1827? Okay, I remembered. That's long-term planning. So I think that has changed dramatically from the first time I was in Brazil in 1990, well, actually 1989. But the March 90 is the figure I'm talking about because that was when I was married. I remember the inflation. And ESG is becoming more important. I just look at a fund, which I actually shared with I see another family office here in the audience who's a friend of mine. I shared a ESG compliant fund with him, which focused on electrification, the fact that the world's going to have to put $4 trillion a year, every year to 2050 to solve the whole question of renewable energy. Energy is scarce right now. We see what's going on in the Middle East, climate control. It's $150 trillion that's going to be investing. ESG is becoming increasingly important. It's not at the same level as European families where they talk about it, and it's not an option. It's an obligation in almost any institutional funds. U.S. is in the middle, and Latin America is catching up, in my opinion.
Thank you. I think we're short on time. Thank you all for being here, and I hope it was informative.
Thank you.